So last time I spoke about Activision Blizzard, the news wasn't good because of the way one particular lawsuit went. The EEOC, which is a federal government organization, in their lawsuit against Activision Blizzard only had them settle for a mere $18 million, which for a multi-billion-dollar corporation like Activision Blizzard, it's mere pennies. And Activision Blizzard's response alongside that of the CWA, the union that Activision Blizzard has been partnering with, is that $18 million is a slap in the face to workers considering Activision Blizzard is worth $72 billion and workers dealt with toxic working conditions for years. Now, as part of that EEOC settlement, Activision Blizzard was no longer mandated to retain certain evidence that would be key for the DFEH's case against Activision Blizzard, the organization that started all of this essentially, and they objected to the EEOC settlement proposal with Activision in the hopes that they'd be able to mitigate the potential destruction of evidence that could result. But unfortunately, the DFEH screwed up. They hired lawyers from the EEOC who had worked in that case against Activision Blizzard to also be a part of their investigation on Activision Blizzard, which creates a conflict of interest. And now this is an aspect that has given Activision Blizzard and the EEOC legal leeway to reject the DFEH's objection against the settlement and has bolstered Activision Blizzard's defense. It's a mistake that may have cost the DFEH case dearly, but on the flip side, recently we got some interesting news about ways that Activision Blizzard will be capitulating to the demands of employees. It's not 100% perfect. There's still some ways to go, and the question remains, will Activision Blizzard's actions reflect the intention that they're expressing? But recall that back in September 2nd, 2021, Activision Blizzard King employees posted the following Twitter image in which they relayed their demands. And the first thing listed here is an end to mandatory arbitration clauses in all employees' contracts, which is a clause that essentially doesn't allow employees to settle legal matters in court, but instead have to go through a hearing process that's all organized by the company itself. And because the company gets to have an influence over that process, obviously the rate at which employees win such hearings is extremely low. And it's just an awful clause that just gives more power to the corporation over disputes. And this is one demand to keep in mind for today's video and for the latest developments. Demand number 2 was the adoption of recruiting, interviewing, hiring, and promotion policies designed to improve representation among employees at all levels, agreed upon by employees in a company-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion organization. Number 3 was the publication of data on relative compensation, including equity grants and profit sharing, promotion rates, and salary ranges for employees of all genders and ethnicities at the company. This is a response to the pay disparity that's been prevalent at Activision Blizzard. Finally, number 4, empower a company-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion task force to hire a third party to audit ABK's reporting structure, HR department, and executive staff, because Activision Blizzard managing themselves and holding themselves accountable has clearly not worked out. Now, the reason I bring up all of this is because in a letter to employees from CEO Bobby Kotick, it's been noted that Activision Blizzard will be capitulating to some of these demands. This is a letter published yesterday on October 28th, 2021, and it begins with the usual platitudes you might expect from a PR statement. A few weeks ago, I reiterated our commitment to becoming the most welcoming, inclusive company in our industry. First, I want to offer my sincere gratitude for your bravery and for your exceptional work and all that stuff that at this stage just doesn't matter. My goal and the goal of our board, our entire senior corporate team, our business unit leaders and their teams is to make sure you have the resources, culture, and commitment from leadership you need to succeed in our collective aspiration to be the model workplace in our industry. What a bunch of bullshit. This is the company whose executives straight up were dismissive about the DFEH's claims and the employees' corroboration of the horrible stories relayed by the lawsuit's report. Fran Townsend in particular just straight up came out and said that the DFEH's information was inaccurate, that it was out of context, that the facts were distorted, and all this other bullshit. And on Fran Townsend's Twitter account, she was posting articles about why whistleblowing is a bad thing. For Fran Townsend, it was all about defending the corporation that she was a major part of as an executive who's making millions off of this company. So for Bobby to come out here and talk about how the goal of the entire senior corporate team is to help employees instead of looking out for themselves, the same corporation that hired WilmerHale, the union-busting firm, to investigate all of this, this is the same corporation that's been alleged to be shredding documents and destroying evidence to mitigate some of the fallout, the same corporation that's been using coercive tactics to interrogate employees or intimidate them into making sure that they don't speak out too much against the company that they represent. Given all of the actions that Activision Blizzard has taken at the expense of employees since the DFVH lawsuit, for him to come out here and say that the goal of the board, the entire senior corporate team, the business unit leaders and their teams, is to succeed in their collective aspiration to be the model workplace in the industry, is just entirely laughable. Bobby Kotick then expressed that we believed we had the systems, policies, and people in place to ensure that our company always lived up to its reputation as a great place to work. Clearly, in some vitally important aspects, we didn't. This whole attitude from Bobby, oh my god, if I would have known. Like, shut the hell up. You have known. It's just a matter of, it's too much trouble to do anything about it, and you didn't deem it worth doing anything about, because that's just how little you give a shit about employees and their livelihoods and the fact that you're responsible for them. He added that the guardrails weren't in place everywhere to ensure that our values were being upheld. There were guardrails at all. In some cases, people didn't consistently feel comfortable reporting concerns, or their concerns weren't always addressed promptly or properly. People were deeply let down, and for that, I am truly sorry. Given all of the dismissive responses and the lack of proper action that preceded this letter and how long it took to finally get here, this apology means jack shit as far as I'm concerned. And more platitudes, regardless of differences, voices will be heard, perspectives welcomed, and contributions valued. Again, says the company that's shredding evidence and trying to lower the voices of employees through coercive tactics. It's noted that they've tripled their investment in anti-harassment and anti-discrimination training. No training in the world will ultimately dissuade abusers from abusing if there aren't consequences for their actions. That's the main thing. Accountability, which is woefully lacking within Activision Blizzard, especially for executives, a number of who should have been fired at this point but are still safe and sound in their ivory tower. Now, scrolling further down is where we finally get some good news, ways in which Activision Blizzard and CEO Bobby Kotick have capitulated to the demands of employees, to some of those demands. So here are 5 new changes that Activision Blizzard are implementing, and first on the list is launching a new zero-tolerance harassment policy company-wide. In the past, when we discovered and substantiated harassment, we terminated some employees and provided verbal or written warnings or different disciplinary actions to others. You gotta love how throughout all of this, they're still kind of trying to pat themselves in the back and presenting themselves as, well, we didn't do that bad of a job, but there's some areas where we could improve. Like, no, you completely bungle this up. The statement continues, in retrospect, to achieve our goals for workplace excellence, this approach is no longer adequate. You needed retrospection to come to that realization. We need tougher rules and consistent monitoring across the entire company to make sure reports are being handled correctly and discipline is appropriate and swift. Any Activision Blizzard employee found through our new investigative processes and resources to have retaliated against anyone for making a compliance complaint will be terminated immediately. In many other instances of workplace misconduct, we will no longer rely on written warnings. Termination will be the outcome, including in most cases of harassment based on any legally protected category. For all reports of harassment and retaliation, we will investigate the allegation and whether Activision Blizzard personnel who received the report of such behavior took the appropriate steps to protect the integrity of our compliance processes. That all sounds great and all, but Activision Blizzard was always supposed to have a zero-tolerance policy for harassment-related incidents, so I guess now they're saying, no, this is zero tolerance for real this time, and whether any of this is any good will be a matter of how much they live up to their word, whether the systemic issues that has caused employees to go unlistened or has straight up caused the HR department to be on the side of abusers and encouraging employees to not speak out against abusers and being protective of abusers or being part of the abusing itself. If all that cannot be ironed out, then it doesn't matter what the policy says. If the people on a systemic level, the heads of certain departments and the leaders and the people in positions of power won't actually abide by these policies and do right by the employees. So it's a matter of waiting and seeing how much of this holds true. Like they say right here, for all reports of harassment and retaliation, we will investigate the allegation and whether Activision Blizzard personnel who received the report of such behavior took the appropriate steps. But that was part of the problem, the fact that Activision Blizzard were the ones holding themselves accountable and were complacent to their own crimes that were happening right under the noses of leaders and executives, or under the noses of leaders who partook in the nefarious activities. So unless there's a third-party entity serving as Overwatch to all of this, it's hard to be 100% confident that this is the solution. Number 2 was we'll increase the percentage of women and non-binary people in our workforce by 50%, and we'll invest $250 million to accelerate opportunities for diverse talent. But beyond hiring diverse talent, Activision Blizzard has to make sure that these people are treated fairly and equally. Pay disparity is one of the major issues that's permeated Activision Blizzard, dependent on gender and race and all that stuff, as has been commonly reported by the DFEH and employees alike. So, beyond hiring people for their talent rather than for their appearance, it's important that these people are treated fairly. Now, this is a big one. Number 3, based on feedback from employees, we are waiving required arbitration of sexual harassment and discrimination claims for any Activision Blizzard employee who chooses not to arbitrate an individual claim of sexual harassment, unlawful discrimination, or related retaliation arising in the future. The company will waive any obligation to do so, meaning employees are now able to take disputes like this in the category of sexual harassment and discrimination to court rather than having to go through Activision Blizzard's hearing process that does not favor employees and victims. They tend to favor corporations, whereas in the court of law, things can be a bit more balanced. Things can be much more fair. Though that's not to say that corporations just don't in general have an advantage during legal battles because of how much money and resources they have to see a legal battle through with all of their expensive lawyers. But this is definitely a big step forward and something that was sorely needed and one of the key demands of Activision Blizzard employees, an end to mandatory arbitration clauses in all employee contracts. Now, it doesn't seem like they went all the way here because they specifically say waiving required arbitration of sexual harassment and discrimination claims. So for other disputes, they may not consider ending arbitration. So it's not an end to arbitration outright from what I understand. It's just an end to arbitration for these specific cases. Another employee demand that was addressed was more visibility on pay equity, about which Activision Blizzard and Bobby Kotick had this to say: the company continues to focus on pay equity for employees. In fact, our U.S. analysis show that women at the company on average earn slightly more than men for comparable work in 2020. I'm going to have to see some evidence for that, as that does not reflect the account of many employees in the DFEH's report. And the general occurrence of Blizzard workers back in August of 2020 revolting by sharing their salaries in a spreadsheet that eventually became public. And that's where people got to see for themselves just how bad that pay disparity was. And the fact that there was a revolt at all speaks to how unhappy employees were. So Bobby Kotick's attempt to try to pat themselves in the back yet again and try to cleanse themselves a little bit of culpability, this effort is meager at best. But this paragraph does close off on a better note: to ensure transparency in our continuing commitment to pay equity, we will report these results annually. So as long as it's transparent enough, the publication of such a report would make it very difficult for pay disparity to go unnoticed, making it less likely that that will happen. And so this would be a very good thing, assuming that it is implemented in a way that employees would be happy about. And finally, for number 5, we'll provide regular progress updates. We'll see about that. We'll see how this continues to develop. And then another major point of discussion in this statement is the huge pay cut that CEO Bobby Kotick took. I have asked our board of directors to reduce my total compensation until the board has determined that we have achieved the transformational gender-related goals and other commitments described above. Specifically, I have asked the board to reduce my pay to the lowest amount California law will allow for people earning a salary, which this year is $62,500. To be clear, this is a reduction in my overall compensation, not just my salary. I'm asking not to receive any bonuses or be granted any equity during this time. Last we heard about Bobby Kotick's annual compensation, we were looking at somewhere in the tune of $150 million. Just utterly ridiculous. To give you an idea for how much of a reduction this number is, $62,500, we're looking at a number that represents roughly 0.04 2% of that $150 million. So a huge, huge pay cut. Now, don't be fooled. This is nowhere near enough punishment for Bobby Kotick, the leader who failed to protect his employees. I mean, this is 1 year's worth of millions and millions of dollars that he's missing out on. He'll be back the next and still be making ridiculous sums of money. Nothing about his lifestyle ultimately changes with this reduction in salary for 1 year. Nothing short of the full removal of Bobby Kotick from his leadership position will satisfy the need for this man to face accountability and justice. Now, that's not to say that this is nothing, but if Bobby Kotick thinks that this gesture is enough to redeem him from all of his misgivings and all of his complacency and his failed leadership, then he's got something else coming to him, or at least that's the hope. Who knows what he might be able to get away with. And then finally, more empty platitudes. You are a truly special group of people, he says. Meanwhile, it wasn't long ago that he fired over 800 special people just on a whim, even though Activision Blizzard saw a record year of revenue. Yeah, very special. And then once again, sincerely apologizing to those who were affected. And I'll once again say actions will speak louder than words. So far, the hiring of WilmerHale, the destruction of evidence, the coercive tactics that they've used, the dismissive statements that they've output, all of that stuff does not paint the picture of a leadership that's genuinely apologetic. Instead, it paints the picture of an executive team that's desperate to save face. Now, a Better ABK, which is the alliance of Activision Blizzard King employees who have been organizing protests against executives and issuing these demands, have acknowledged that overall this is a big win. Today was a huge win for ABK Workers Alliance. Forced arbitration has been removed for cases that deal in sexual harassment and discrimination. The company announced it will raise the number of women and non-binary people it employs by 50%. Bobby Kotick also announced he'll be taking a major pay cut. This is what happens when we work together to create a better future for game developers in our company. Together, we'll continue to push for other changes that need to be made so that we can make a better ABK. So basically, the battle is won, but the war is still far from over. There's still more that can be demanded from executives. There are still more changes that can be made. A Better ABK further elaborated, while today was a huge win for us, we remain vigilant and continue to push for other industry practices that need to change. We still stand firm by our demand that the investigation must be done by an unbiased third party, of which WilmerHale is not one. That's one of the main issues, is employees demanding that third-party entities get involved in the process of making proper changes. But Activision Blizzard continues to hire firms of their own choice, organizations that are in clear conflict of interest based on their relationship with Activision Blizzard. And one of the major demands from a Better ABK was that they be allowed to hire a third party to audit ABK's reporting structure, HR department, and executive staff. That's one area where Activision Blizzard refuses to yield on. It's really hard to trust perpetrators to essentially police themselves. You need third-party policing entities to have an unbiased mindset and be able to deliver swift consequences and accountability to the parties who deserve it. And with Activision Blizzard hiring companies and organizations that have the corporation's best interest in mind, that's one area where employees still need to push more for. And then the statement closes off with, we continue to push for light to be shed on other industry practices like crunch, which can be especially harmful for health of game developers, and especially the health of disabled and chronically ill game developers. We continue to give our unwavering support for our colleagues across the industry who are also pushing for change. Ubisoft, in particular, still has demands that are not being met. Together, we will be the change. Now, since all this went down, a Better ABK has been retweeting posts from folks working at Activision Blizzard or relevant entities who have been chiming in on this situation. So Tracy Kennedy here, who is a producer on Overwatch, expressed how this is very much a systemic issue, and if it's not resolved on a systemic level, then history will repeat itself, stating it doesn't really matter if we fill a bunch of IC roles with women if the abusive structures are still in place and there's a lack of third-party checks on that power. Third-party checks being the key words. A one-time sweep of old HR cases isn't systemic change either. Now, here we have a CEO, Dan Price, who expressed why the end of arbitration is such a good thing. When non-union employees have a dispute with a company, it goes to arbitration. If you're beaten on the job, denied basic rights, wrongfully fired, you don't go to open court, you go to a secret hearing. The result, employees win 1.6% of the time, a minuscule win rate. So with the end of arbitration for cases like sexual harassment and discrimination, that's going to be a huge boost for victims to be able to pursue cases like this in court, and that will hopefully discourage abusers, as now there is a higher chance that they will face some severe consequences for their nefarious actions. And there is general acknowledgement that this is a big step forward. Valentine Powell, who also works at Blizzard, said today Activision Blizzard committed to ending forced arbitration and to increasing the percentage of women and non-binary people at our companies to 33% within 5 years. This is a huge step forward. I want to take this moment to thank every single worker, organizer, and player who put in their time and energy. I want to thank the people who put their careers and safety on the line, and I want to thank those who are no longer with the company but fought alongside us anyway. I look forward to our next steps. Activision Blizzard has committed to pay transparency, and we need to hold them accountable for that. And we still need to fight for a recommitment to our DE&I efforts and a thorough audit of our business practices by a third party. Once again, that's the main thing that's brought up. We need outside policing rather than inside policing. These continued steps forward have only been possible because of the amazing workers at our companies who have stood up and demanded change, and I want to make sure that those workers have a continued voice at the table to help continue to shape policy. Today is a huge win, but we still have a long way to go. I'm so proud of all of us. Let's keep at it, y'all. Keep in mind that this isn't just an Activision Blizzard war. This is a gaming industry-wide war between employees and people in power who abuse that power. And for change to happen across the entire landscape, the voices must continue to rise. The voices must continue to be loud. And given how many companies in the gaming industry continue to get away with this shit, Ubisoft especially, but plenty of others as well, there's still more fighting and protesting to do. But this is definitely the biggest this fire, this push against abusers in the gaming landscape has been. And hopefully this is a ball that keeps rolling until positive change permanently happens across the board. But until then, it is important to count the victories that are there, and this latest development is certainly a big victory for Activision Blizzard workers. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything I have to say. This is one man's take on the situation. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Bobby Kotick's letter indicating some of the latest changes that they're making to capitulate to employees' demands, and how you see all of this playing out in the long term. Share your thoughts below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.